You have discovered the Marry Your Best Friend podcast. This is episode 6. I'm John, and I'm seated next to my beautiful wife of 33 years, Suzanne. And well, one of us has had over 100 jobs.
And my 100 jobs are every day. Every day.
So every day you have 100 jobs.
Every day I have 100 jobs.
I don't think that's the subject that we're talking about tonight. We're talking about actually one of us has had over 100 real jobs, like paycheck jobs.
Paycheck jobs.
Because you do have over 100 jobs every day. Feeding,
They're not
driving.
paycheck worthy, though?
No,
you don't think?
No. You do get paid.
Oh, I do get paid.
Yeah. Money does exchange hands, I should say. So, but how many jobs have you had in your life? I mean, how many different paychecks and things of that nature, or careers?
Well, career really just probably 3. Well, I don't think that a career in like a little dress shop when you're in high school, I don't think you can call that a career.
Well, I don't think you ever made money in the dress shop.
No, I did not.
Because you worked at Henry's. That was one of your first jobs.
I loved that job.
And as I recall, your parents always said that you never brought home any money because you always owed more on clothing than what you actually worked.
The boxes would come in and we would unpack the boxes, and all the girls, because it was just girls that worked there, so we would just like, oh, that is super cute. We're just going to put that in a sack with our name on it. And we would put them in the back and, say, oh, we'll pay for that when we get paid. So sometimes you would have like a negative paycheck when you really, paid out what you owed to the store. And
I'm sure your dad was happy, though, that you're helping pay for your own clothing. During that time. I mean, that was the preppy time. That was like during really cute preppy clothes during the 80s.
Yeah, we had the jean wall. That was so fun. I had to learn 32 waist. I didn't know what any of that meant.
There you go. Well, I will tell you, I mean, like as long as I've known you, Suzanne, you've had one calling. When you were a kid, you probably felt, you've told me you had one calling. There's one job that you always wanted to do, and that's being a teacher.
And I was that. I think I was a pretty good teacher.
You were a great teacher. I remember when we first got married, I always argued that you could make more money at like a Taco Bell than you could as a teacher, but you felt called as a teacher. And I remember watching how great those kids were with you. And you've taught every grade. I mean, you taught middle school, you taught high school.
Yeah. Well, when we got engaged, I was doing my student teaching. So I did high school. I got asked to the prom.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, that was kind of fun. And then when we got married, I didn't get a classroom job just yet. So I went to daycare, and I did that, and I still had a class to catch up on.
Yeah, it was while you're working on finishing up your degree.
Yep,
you worked at Kindercare, and boy, we made some great friends then. And some kids, literally some kids in your how old was Courtney at that time?
Oh, she was probably 4 months old.
Yeah, 4 months old. So literally we are still friends with somebody that you had as a 4-month-old child. So, and you've had a long legacy of your friends, and I'd be surprised if some of your students aren't watching the podcast. Hey, by the way, we're up to, are you ready for this? 38 subscribers on YouTube. Wow. Yep, and we're global now. I
global?
Noticed, yes, we are, because we had like 260 downloads of our podcast, and one was in Europe and one was in Africa. So our podcast is really spreading around the globe.
It's really exploded.
Yeah, it's really exploded.
Gee, it's global. Do you think they can understand me because I can't get Siri to understand me?
No, I don't think that's the case. But okay. I think it's global, and it wasn't my traveling. So there actually is somebody in Europe, and there actually is somebody in Africa who's listening. So
wow,
I'm kind of excited about that. Okay, so going back, you have students that you're still friends with to this day.
Oh, absolutely.
Junior high and
thank goodness,
and high school, and even preschool.
For Facebook, that's brought all those students right, kind of full circle. I'm watching them have kids, and awesome. Some of them be teachers, which is really cool. Yeah, so I did that, and then I taught middle school for so many years, and then went back to preschool because I had middle schoolers at home, and there is no way in hell that I was gonna go to school and teach preschoolers. They're so mean.
Oh, and you mean middle schoolers? Yeah.
Yes, and then come home to middle schoolers at my house because they're so mean. So I went to preschool and got all the love.
They do love you. Well, before you were a teacher, when did you first decide you wanted to be a teacher?
I was probably
I've had a lot of different careers. So
second grade.
Second grade.
Second or third grade.
You knew you wanted to be a teacher?
Yeah, and I never changed my mind. That was it.
That's good. What did you do before being a teacher? What was your first job, your very first job?
Oh, yeah, Bollinger Industries.
Bollinger Industries, please hold.
Bollinger Industries, please hold, yeah.
I just remember you were the receptionist there.
My cousin gave me the job because my mother told him to.
Okay, so Bollinger Industries
She said,
is-
do this and do this right now. She will show up tomorrow and you will put her to work. And he said, okay.
That's funny. Bollinger Industries was run by or owned by your cousins Bobby Bollinger and Glenn Bollinger, and it's now called Alliance Sports Group. They've sold, but they like consumer products, like a lot of consumer products and fitness products, and I know how much you love fitness, so that made a great fit for you.
Really knowledgeable.
Well, they sold like exercise bikes and solar belts and all kinds of fun stuff.
I had to learn how to put the exercise bike together because I was customer service, the one and only person in customer service at that time.
Time out. So somebody's putting together a bike and they have to
And they call me.
So
and say it's not working or this part doesn't fit.
if
And
that's not an episode of Lucy, I don't know.
I'm talking, I had to research.
So
It was
how
crazy.
big was the customer service department?
That would be me.
That was you.
That would be me.
So
I can't even
so
believe
Bobby
they
gets a phone
trusted
call.
me.
Bobby gets a phone call from your mom saying you will hire her tomorrow, and he says, "Okay, have her answer the phones." And then once you
Yeah,
learn how to
she
answer
didn't
the
care
phones,
what I did. They put me in the filing room. I answered the phones. I did whatever there was to do. Bobby always gave me a job.
well, that's awesome.
It was awesome.
When we first started being friends, I just remembered when we were engaged and stuff. You worked for Big John Hall.
I
Your
worked
dad.
for my dad 2 different stages in my life.
I just remember you working at the ministry in the office where you had to organize his office. But before that, I think you worked.
Oh no! Before that, it was the Big John's Quick Lube.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Oh, my
If you don't know
gosh.
Suzanne's family, Suzanne's dad was in the oil business.
That's what we like to tell people.
Yeah, we always like to tell people he was in the oil business. What it really
We didn't
was
wanna go into
he had an
details.
old office and decided to tear it down and open a business. And he decided to open the business was going to be a lube center because he loved cars and he always loved talking about cars and everything of that nature. Well, the problem was the moment that he broke ground and started putting up the lube center, it was going to be Big John's Quick Lube. Right across the street, another company decided called Jiffy Lube. We might have heard of them, kind of the largest.
Small
firm.
at the time.
Small at the time. But Jiffy Lube opened a location directly across the street from Big John Hall.
Oh my gosh, that Quick Lube was the thorn in our family's flesh.
Well, but we always say he's in the oil business because your brother never wanted to tell people he was in the ministry. So I guess the oil
There's
business.
a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah, the oil business was better than being in the ministry. But I once again, I can't see you sitting behind the counter taking people's.
It was
credit cards.
it was never cleaner than when I worked there. But the kicker, if you worked at the register at Dad's Quick Lube, there was like a little shelf over to the side, like you had your cash register and the little shelf. And on the little shelf, there were CDs and cassette tapes and videotapes.
So
And
Big John selling his own records at
yeah.
Big John Quick
And
Lube?
so, you would take, and don't forget to have a look over here at the CDs.
That's funny. Along with
Always selling merchandise.
that, along with that lube and oil change you just had. Here's
Yeah.
a new Christian music CD. Oh, I love your dad.
Good times.
Yeah, your dad was incredibly. He loved selling the records and the tapes.
Yeah, during the time that I worked in his office was his anniversary year, of like 75 year or
50 years, I think it was.
50 years. I don't remember. It all runs together. But I mean, I had to put stickers on all the things that had to be mailed out. They had an anniversary thing. And it was great because that was a pivotal time in my life because that's when
You and I got together.
we finally decided to make this thing stick.
Well, I think about your jobs: teacher, Bollinger Industries, Big John Hall, Ministries, and Quick Loop Center, and then at Henry's. I've had more jobs in high school than you had in like your entire life.
Yeah, I was focused, man. I wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. I knew exactly what I wanted to do.
Well, I tried to write out all the different jobs because I think the first job that I had was as a dishwasher. And it was at MCL cafeteria. And it was
Or you're getting detailed.
Well, no, I was at MCL at cafeteria. My dad said, you should probably get a job. And I said, I can get a job. And so I walked over to the manager and asked if I could have a job. And he put me back in the dish room. That lasted a day, I think.
Yeah, you and manual labor do not go hand in hand.
No, but I did get a free pie out of the deal. So I worked there in the MCL cafeteria. And then I remember being a pizza delivery driver. That was for like a day.
Yeah,
And,
again.
One of my favorite jobs in high school, though, was I worked at the floral shop right over by, at the time, it was the Airway Mall. Then it became the Target Mall. It's over by where Cost Plus is now over in Carmel. And I worked at the floral shop. And
That was the Target Mall over
it was. And one of
I
the,
always hear y'all talk about
well, the
the
main
Target
reason why I was all excited about working at the floral shop, I just delivered. Like I'd show up and they had deliveries and I'd get paid. If I didn't, then I just sat there and did my homework. But one of the ladies in the shop, her husband was a mechanic for an IndyCar team. And every night I wanted to kind of hear, what are they working on?
Did he tell you
he
stories
showed me
and
pictures and
stuff?
all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was the first time I was ever worked around anybody who was actually in IndyCar racing. But then in high school I also became a lifeguard, and that was a fun
I
job.
can see you doing that, you know, in
enjoyed
your
that.
little swimsuit.
I wore my swimsuit, worked at an apartment complex, and watched the pool there.
I bet you had quite the lifeguard ego.
I had a whistle and I spun it around. That was pretty cool. I
can just see you spinning that whistle and whoo.
I did save somebody. Probably the best job, though, that I had in high school. You had your shopping job at Henry's. I worked at Lazarus.
And Lazarus is like a Dillard's, right?
It is.
Because Lazarus was gone by the time I'm
Lazarus
here.
is now Macy's. But yeah, when I was in high school, it was the same location and everything. I worked at Lazarus, and I was the electronics and computer salesperson. And at that point in time, we had like the Atari.
You were the IT guy.
Well, no, I was selling computers. I think we had like a Commodore computer, and I had to sell computers. But I was amazed.
An Odyssey.
No, I was amazed.
That's what we had.
That they gave me a discount, and I could buy anything I wanted. And
in any department. That's when they were department stores. Like when they had furniture and albums, and it wasn't just makeup and clothes.
I bought a girl a ring when I was there. I was a junior in high school. And
I am not surprised.
Well, no, it was Christmas. It was Christmas, and I went down to the jewelry department, and I couldn't afford like a bracelet, and I couldn't afford anything else. But this ring that had like a tiny little minuscule little diamond, I bought it and gave it to her. And
like a promise ring?
I didn't really know about the promise ring at that point in time. I kind of got in trouble because she read into that ring a lot more than I did.
Yeah, you're such a sucker.
I know. But anyway, I will tell you
forever a romantic.
This is what's different about society, though, today. I was a high school kid, and after work at Lazarus, so at the mall there, what is that, Castleton Square Mall, there was a restaurant called Spats. And they had like the bar. It was kind of like a Champs type of place. But I would go in there after work with the people that I worked with at Lazarus. They would invite me in. They'd all be drinking and stuff. And I would see high school teachers in there drinking. And I think about this. This was 1982, 1983. I was drinking in the Spats underage with high school teachers. And
they were totally okay with it.
There was nothing wrong with it. Yeah, like I remember a certain history
there's anything
teacher.
wrong with
Not
that.
there's anything wrong with that. But I just remember sitting there having drinks with high school teachers. I just can't imagine that today.
Yeah, your high school, they had some questionable teachers.
But then I went to college, and all of a sudden my jobs changed. My first job at college was a tour guide. I was the tour guide at the Prayer Center, the Prayer Tower at Oral Rochester University.
I didn't work in college.
You didn't at all?
No, not one job.
Well, during the summer you worked.
But I mean, I did not work while I was in school.
Well, I was a tour guide, and then that continued because I did that at Universal. After I left college.
How long were you at Universal, John?
Not very long.
What talk about how you would
make things up
and show like the Psycho House and.
Well, I knew the whole speech.
Yeah,
because Jaws would come up and you do the whole thing. But
that's my favorite.
Yeah, you liked that job, but I will tell you probably the worst job though is I went to Oral Rochester University, and then one semester I went to Springfield, Missouri, because this girl that I liked was at Evangel. Unfortunately, she was dating somebody else at the time, and she didn't want to give me a time of day. And
she was so cute.
She was so cute. She's in Texas. Yeah. Anyway, I moved to Springfield, Missouri to be close to her, and she had a boyfriend and didn't really care about me.
You just showed up.
Well, I did show up because I left Oral Roberts University and I came to Springfield, Missouri to SMS.
You didn't call me with intention, or you just showed up and thought that my world would change because you were now.
I did, but so here I went
pursuing.
Here I moved to Springfield, Missouri. I'm living with some guy in a house, and my dad once again says, "Hey, you need
guy. Who's the guy?"
His name was Tim. But anyway, and that I found out of like the classified ads. But my dad said, "It's time for you to get a job. I'm tired of you paying for this thing." So I looked in the paper. I was a radio and TV major, and so I had to look at something. And I looked at the paper. I told him I'm still looking for a job. This is before Monster or anything like that, or any online
Monster
LinkedIn. like average could like to find a job. You went to the paper.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the classified ads, and what do you know? They had a classified ad for a DJ. And I was like, hey, I've been a radio guy. I can go do this. I can go do.
So you're thinking you're going to be spinning records and
yeah. So I go interview at this place,
like at a roller rink or something fun like that.
And it was over there. It was over by the airport in Springfield, and they had like a bunch of automotive dealerships and like repair facilities and all that kind of stuff. And the place was called the Body Shop Lounge. So I just assumed that it was
lounge. Well, lounge was not a tip off for you.
No. Lounge wasn't a tip off. Neither was Body Shop.
Yeah,
because I automatically assumed that it was by all the auto places, so it just made sense. So as I go in there to interview, I remember having a great interview, and she said, "Oh, do you like playing music?" I said, "Yeah."
So it was a woman that interviewed you.
Yeah. This older lady who owned the place, and then she said, "Oh, it's really simple. I need you on Friday and Saturdays." And she said, "The girls will tell you what music to play." And I'm like, "Oh, that's great."
The girls. Again, no red flags.
No red flag. I'm from Oral Roberts University. I'm a Christian kid. I'm standing in this lounge, and this lady is telling me that the girls...
You were not naive. I hate to bring
Well, I was naive about this because as she started talking to me, I'm like, the girls, and I'm thinking there's like fans that are, so excited to tell you what music to play. No.
Oh, like as request.
Yeah, as request. That's what I thought it was.
Oh,
well, so then a girl came walking up in like a satin jacket and panties, and she goes, "Oh, hi, are you our new DJ?" And she says, "I'm like Samantha." And I'm looking at her going, "Uh-oh." And I start looking around going, wait, where did all these poles come from? Like, I had no idea that I was in a dance place. And so, needless to say...
My dad found that hard to believe that you went in so completely naive.
I did go in completely naive. I learned after that, but...
did you show up for work on that job?
I did not.
You just ghosted him.
I just walked away at that point in time. But I think another job I had in college was I worked in an ad agency. That was the first time I worked in an ad agency, a company called Johnson & Johnson, and got to write ad copy and got to sell ads and meet with clients. And
what year was that? Because I think I remember that.
Yeah, it was probably when we were dating and stuff like that. Because and I remember one time
when we were speaking.
Actually, the summer after my freshman year, that was when I bought a motorcycle, and my dad told me, "Get your ass home." And sell the motorcycle, and you're going to come work here and pay off that motorcycle, because I may have used my
clothing allowance, right?
No, it wasn't clothing allowance. It was the deposit on the fall tuition. So spring of freshman year.
Did they get like a letter?
Yeah. Spring of freshman year, I was dating a lot of people, and I thought a motorcycle would be a great way to increase my dating, and it was. And so in order to pay for the motorcycle, I had to kind of borrow a little bit from the fall tuition payment that my dad sent me. And so I bought a motorcycle. Dad found out about it. My sister told me, "Oh, John comes over here all the time. He rides his bike over." And he was like, "Bike? What do you mean bike? He didn't take a bike to college." And she said,
"I didn't know your sister was the one that sold you out."
Oh, no, she totally sold me out. Like, she was the one. And that's when Dad called and said, "No son of mine's going to have a motorcycle." And
I just remember you sold it at my house.
Yeah.
I sold the motorcycle. Up on a trailer
I sold the motorcycle.
My neighborhood.
Sold the motorcycle. I came back, and my dad made me work painting houses that summer.
I remember.
And I painted. I worked. That was manual labor. I learned how to paint houses and worked for a great crew and had a great time. But yeah, those were all the kind of jobs we had before we got married. And then,
well, doesn't everybody have those kind of jobs before they,
I think so. But
have a quote career?
But then I moved out to California and was trying to do the actor thing, and always got paid like voiceover talent, and every now and then got paid for modeling and different stuff. But
hold on,
that's when I was then.
Yes. We have to go back and just say that you called me as you were leaving your parents' house to move to California. And how far did you get before you had to call your dad?
Okay, so I think we've talked about this before on the show, but I made it to the edge of the neighborhood before I ran out of gas. Had to go knock on somebody's door and say, "Hey, can you call my parents' house and tell them to come give me some gas?" So I was ready to roll out on my own and be all alone. But anyway, when we got married, so I was living in Los Angeles. We moved to Nashville. We got married, loaded up the rental van full of wedding gifts, and we moved to Nashville.
Which was all we had in the world.
Which is all we had in the world. And I knew I wanted to be in the entertainment business, and so I was trying to sell some TV shows and things of that nature. But really what I ended up doing is waiting tables, and we waited tables. I waited tables at a restaurant. And actually the greatest thing about that was you were working at the daycare, but I convinced you to be a hostess at the table, at the place where I was waiting tables. So
yeah, our neighbor was the manager. So
right.
I went across the street, or went across the whatever alleyway, and I asked her, how would it be if you scheduled me for a couple days, and I would put all the big tippers in your
Well, you knew
section.
You knew who I could work, who I could get a good
If they were
going to
get on your nerves, they were going.
If
to
they were
somebody
church
else.
people, somebody else. If they were drinkers, I got them.
Absolutely, girls totally sent them to you.
Large black women, I got them all because I could work that table. But if they were like conservative white folks, didn't get them. So that was great having you. And then I remember one of the guys that I worked with there invited me to wait tables during the day, and I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I work at a private dining room at the bank."
Oh, that was a great job.
Oh my gosh! And then he says you work from 10 until 2 in the afternoon, and that was the first time I worked in fine dining, where we had to clean all the silverware and have it all ready, and then we would end up setting the table. And it was the first time I was around a real chef. And every day the menu was different. Every day the chef would prepare, whatever food that he had coming in.
The best part about that was that you actually got to eat, these fantastic meals.
Every single day.
Yeah.
Yep, every single day.
Because Lord knows, we were 23 years old, 24 years old.
And that's when I first started
eating
gaining weight.
SpaghettiOs.
Yeah. And I was having like filet at lunch and stuff like that.
I was eating whatever they were serving at KinderCare and running to take classes.
And then after I worked in the restaurant, I remember I got a real job, and it was Ron Smith, if you remember from church, Michelle's husband, asked me to work in like a telephone room where I was setting appointments for financial planners, and we were selling not timeshares, we were selling investment shares in a retirement community down in Florida.
I never really knew what that was all about.
It was basically a phone
I just
room.
knew that you had another job.
Yeah, I had another job. Well, I left the restaurant, started working for Ron, and he was like the Glenn Ross type of sales guy. I was like sitting behind a desk with a phone, and we had to get appointments. Like that was our job, was to call these people. He would give us leads, and Jeff, this guy named Jeff Holmes, got all the good leads because he was the closer.
Ooh, what I did forget is during that time, that's when I was being a wedding coordinator.
You were a wedding coordinator. Oh my
the
gosh, that's another
church.
job we totally forgot about.
Yeah, I totally
You were a
forgot
wedding
about
coordinator.
that.
You were a wedding coordinator at our church.
That's
Our
kind
church
of
at
a
the time
big deal that
It was. You had like
yeah.
7,500 people.
I did
at
a
our
lot
church.
of big weddings.
You did big weddings. You did shotgun weddings. You did all kinds of weddings, from country stars to pregnant women.
But that made me think, because I did Michelle and Ron's wedding.
Oh, that's right, you did.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is, I remember that was probably the first job that I had where we got something really cool, and that was a free trip to Florida, because we went down there to.
That was the best. We got to go to Disney World.
We got to go to Disney World, and we drove all the way back together. We just had a blast. It was like, oh my gosh, you mean I'm getting paid to go on a trip somewhere?
I know.
But I was like an appointment setter, and then for some reason I remember that job ended. Like they shut down the office. Like it wasn't, like the people went out of business, whatever it was. And what was funny was the guy across the hall hired me. So I was in the same building, and he hired me. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but I was selling.
I don't remember a lot.
I was selling sales training to sales managers. So I would pick up the phone call, and I call like an auto dealership. Hey, you going to talk to the sales manager, please? And I would sell them sales management meeting like programs and stuff like that. But I just remember that time we worked like 3 or 4 jobs a piece.
Oh yeah.
You were hostess and working at KinderCare, and I was waiting tables, and I was serving. I was working at lunch,
I had 2 more classes to finish, so I was going to school.
And I needed cash, and so I was delivering papers. I remember waking up at 3:30 in the morning and going and throwing USA Today.
And then you had a great volunteering position as well.
I did.
You did.
What was my volunteering position?
Pastor Hardwick.
Oh yeah,
said,
so that's right. So
"Son, where do
when
you
we were
live?"
when we were first married, I never forget this. So this was you were the wedding coordinator at the church, I
Yes.
think, and we were just and we were brand new married. And I remember getting a phone call from Christ Church. We went to Christ Church, and it was right across the street from our apartment complex. And
like a
right across the
stone's
street.
throw. Yeah.
And I remember coming home one day, and on the answering machine, it was, "Hi, this is so-and-so from Christ Church. Pastor Hardwick would like to see you." And I'm like, oh my gosh, the pastor of our church is wanting to see me.
And this is not a small church.
Oh,
this
no,
is
and I was all excited.
gigantic.
I went over there to see him, and he looked at his window, out the window, and he says, John, I've been pastoring this church since I was 18 years of age. And he said, you know what? You know who gets the phone call whenever the alarm goes off at night? And I said, I have no idea, Pastor. He goes, well, it's me. And he said, for 40 plus years. And so he said, if only there was somebody who lived closer.
If
only there was somebody who lived closer that might want to answer the phone call when the police call. And so I volunteered, and he pulled out of his desk like this huge key ring of like 1,000 keys and handed it to me. And I was the number one call on the alarm committee.
Yes, but what you didn't know when you were so earnest in your response to Pastor Hardwick is that it happened every single
Oh my gosh,
night.
yeah, every single night. And you had to go into the
Every
church
night.
to check it out, because if the police came, then they charged the church something. So I was always going to the church.
And dogs, they would send dogs in.
But every night it was going off, and I was going in there. But when we lived in Nashville, that's when I got my first real entertainment job, and got into the music business, and the Christian music business, and gospel music business, and I just remember that was such an incredible time in our lives, because my first artists were people like Al Green and Shirley Caesar and choirs, and
Word was an amazing company to work for then. I mean, my mom was at
once again,
Word.
your mom.
Yeah, my mom was at Word in Dallas, and so it was really cool because she was in the Dallas office, and she was working with Amy and working with Roland before you worked with Roland.
Yep.
So that was really cool.
And we'll have to have another episode on mentors, because I've learned so much from guys like Roland Lundy and Lauren Ballman and Dill Driscoll and different folks. I've been blessed with some really, really great mentors in my life. But in this particular time, I had a job. My first job, though, was with Spectra, and it was Alexandria House and print music and that kind of stuff. And I got fired. I remember Bob McKenzie fired me from that job. And I never will forget, I got fired. I was 23 probably, and I got fired. And the day after getting fired, I get a phone call from Bob McKenzie. Now, Bob McKenzie was a Christian music legend. He was like he helped Bill Gaither get going and started the whole Praise Gathering stuff, the Praise Gathering Publishing. He was the president of the Benson Company. He was the guy, I remember, he was the guy who found Ray Boltz, and the first time you ever heard Thank You. But Bob McKenzie, the day I was fired, the next day I get a phone call from Bob McKenzie. And one funny thing about Bob McKenzie, he never said goodbye. It was just like, when he was done talking, he hung up the phone.
Oh my gosh, that's what our children do.
Oh, but it was like, he called me and says, John.
Nobody says goodbye in this house.
He said, John, meet me for lunch tomorrow at 12 o'clock at Houston's. And then it was like done, like hang up the phone. So I go to him, and I'll never forget this, because I sat with him, and he said, John, he said, here's the reason why you got fired. You spent money without authorization.
That is such a shock.
Well, no, but what happened was,
money without authorization.
What's funny is I threw a big party. All the distributed people all appreciated that we did this big party at CBA. Anyway, the accountants didn't like it. I lost my job. But Bob said, and this was a class move that I try to do to this time. It was the first, but he sat with me and said, John, before you go get another job, I see things in you that were in me at your age. And he says, I want you to change these things before you get another job, because otherwise this could be a pattern in your life. And he gave me some life lessons, and he did it from a real position of love, of saying, and I learned more getting fired from Bob McKenzie than I ever did actually working there, because he went out of his way to tell me ways as a 23-year-old that I needed to change. And I was blessed. I had guys like Tom Ramsey and different people in my life that told me, hey, you need to get better at this and this and this and this. And I don't think a lot of kids get that today, just that real mentoring and coaching.
Absolutely not. Well, I was never fired.
Well,
I've never been fired.
I've been fired twice both times were the best thing that ever happened to me. Bob McKenzie firing me. What was funny was then I went to work at Word, and I remember interviewing with Lauren Ballman, Lauren was literally the best marketing guy in the Christian music space and in the Christian publishing and everything, just brilliant. And I wanted to work for him and learn from him, and he was just a great person to learn from. But Lauren, I never forget my interview, he said, John, the same reason why you got fired over there will get you promoted here. And he was right. He said, because I want somebody who's going to take chances. I want somebody who's going to think out of the box. I want somebody who's going to think big. And so it was funny, because what made me a failure at one place made me a success at another. But and Lauren also taught me, he said, it's not about your job. He said, it's not about your job description or your job, because your goal is to be an impact player. And whatever job you're assigned, be an impact player. And so that's why I was in gospel, then praise and worship, and did sales promotion, did all kinds of stuff. But
I think that's important for you to tell our kids, is that you got to be a team player.
Well, it's like with Jay Daniel being a welder. It's like, it's great to know how to weld, but you need to realize how quickly you can work in order to make more money for your boss. And same thing with Andrew. It's like, if Andrew is working at, Bell Tire, it's a volume. Get the tires on, get them off, and you can't just get paid an hour.
But also, it's. I know that Jay Daniel will work on something, and then he does his portion, and then someone does the next portion, and so they have to work as a team. And a lot of kids don't have jobs like that, where they have to give a little bit of themselves and stretch and pull themselves a little bit. I was thinking today, I told you yesterday about how much certain things are irritating to me, and I was thinking today about how everywhere you go, if you use your debit card or something, you have to it gives you the option to tip. for something so menial, like it's not you're not really tipping the kid, or they're not doing anything. They're handing you the bag that the other kid handed them, you know.
Now you want to be tipped.
But now they want to be tipped, and it's, you know, they're not. I don't think that people are doing jobs to do a good job anymore. I think kids are doing a job because of what they can get back.
Well, but I also don't. I hope my kids don't have to go down the cubicle culture that so many of us had to go down, like where you just work in an office, kind of a soulless office, living in a cubicle. I remember the first.
I think a lot of that's finally.
I don't know. I mean,
diminishing.
I remember early in my career that your title, based on what your title was how big your office was, and if you got a new title, then they would add like 10 feet to your office or try to move.
Oh,
you.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It was very political like that, and yeah. We talk about losing jobs though. There was another job. I mean, when Mike Schatz fired me at Pamplin, that saved our marriage. I was at a place in our life where I was not.
It totally did, it was not good. I mean, it wasn't happy at the time. Like, I wasn't super excited.
No, but I remember when we moved to Texas though, and I'd gone through both of those situations.
Hard is good.
Yeah, when we went to Texas, I remember one of the volunteer roles that I had at the church where I volunteered for was they asked me to be on the career transition ministry at Fierce United Methodist Church, and this was right, and we were living in Grapevine at the time, and at GTE they had a big massive layoff, and they were letting a whole bunch of people go.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, this is one of those jobs that they didn't let me do for very long because I was like all positive to people. Like I was like, losing your job is the greatest thing that's ever happened to you. Right now you get to find out what God wants you to do in your life, and you didn't like your job to begin with. Otherwise you wouldn't have lost it. Wasn't very sensitive. But we've been through that. It's like if you go through job loss, if you go through transition, usually it works out on the other end. Now, sometimes people get stuck in careers that when the career changes, like the music business changed. Like all my friends who are in the music business,
they're doing something else.
They had to reinvent. They had to get into real estate or go into medical sales or something else. They're still playing.
I think
music.
you got out just in time.
Yeah, but a lot of people, they just, had to figure out what were the transferable skills. And so like, for me, going through the music business, I remember I switched into sponsorship and it was that transition when I went to mp3.com and we were selling like corporate sponsorships and corporate partnerships and tours and things of that nature. And I started going to that area. And then I remember our financial planner, Mike Mills, in Texas. Mike said one time, Mike was awesome. He said one time, John, you're a wealthy guy. And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't have any money. He goes, no, not that. He said, you always have the ability to create revenue because you know how to sell. And
my dad said that this was his thing that he said about you. He said, Jon Stewart could sell ketchup to a lady wearing white gloves.
Well, there you go. Well, your dad also got me in trouble a few times. I remember
he liked you to sell his records and tapes, man.
But one time, I remember I came home and talking about jobs. I walked home and you looked at me and you said, "Why in the hell is Benny Hinn's office calling our house?"
Oh, I was not a happy camper.
And I said, "What are you talking about?" And you said, "Well, Benny Hinn's office is calling." And well, it turned out that Benny Hinn, who, if you don't know who Benny Hinn is,
just Google him. We don't need to talk about it.
Imagine a guy in a white suit with a comb over,
just
who
Google
is a healing guy. But your father was, in a conversation with Benny, and Benny was talking about, Pastor Benny was talking about how he had been ripped off like 3 or 4 times from different people in his ministry. Yeah. And your dad said, "I don't know what my son-in-law does, but he's an honest person, and he won't screw you." Well, next thing you know,
I don't think my dad said he won't screw you.
Well, no, but he said something to the effect of,
he will lead you where you're supposed to go.
Well, next thing you know, I'm interviewing for a job to run Benny Hinn's ministry, and
that was a test of faith, man, for me.
Well, but we talk about it again. We came to a point where I remember I was at a Dennis Jernigan concert, and I kind of lifted up my arms and said, "God, there's not a single person I disagree with more theologically than Benny Hinn. But if you're asking me to do this, I will do this." And thankfully, it didn't work out.
The Lord was not speaking to me.
Well, but
in that facet, he was just saying, "Just tell him." Now.
I just remember you going, "How can I tell anybody what you do?" Like, what does John do?
So embarrassed.
He's in the direct mail business, or he's on TV, or he takes money from old ladies. I mean, it's like you didn't know how to
There's nothing good about that. I mean, there's no way to spin that to make it not offensive.
No, but then
masses of people.
But then when I was ready for a big career change, going from the music business and that whole thing, I was looking for a career change. I really had 2 choices in front of me because mp3.com was sold, and I had like and if you remember mp3.com, we got stock options. And our stock options.
You know what? I never remember. I don't even know what MP3. I knew you worked for them, but I didn't know what it was.
MP3.com, our stock options went from $17 where I came in, and then it went up to like $80. And for a while there, I thought we were going to make some money. And then it dropped to like $2 or $3 to where it was costing us money for having that because we couldn't sell when they had to sell. So the next job, I remember I had 2 different job opportunities. One was to follow my heart and to go into motorsports. And I will never forget.
Thank you, Jesus.
Well, no, but the other one was another .com job that recruiters were calling and saying, hey, how would you like...
It was kind of a startup then.
Well, it was a startup then. But what's interesting is somebody gave me the advice to don't make a move and call people who are in the industry that you want to go into and just ask them for a meeting so you can learn more about it. So I literally called 3 people here in Indianapolis, Indiana. One was at the Speedway, one was a race team, and one was a gentleman, Zach Brown, that was starting a motorsports marketing agency at the time. And I called all 3 of them. I said, I'm not looking for a job, but I've done this in my career. I've been a marketing person and revenue in the music industry. I want to see if there's anything transferable that I can do in the motorsports industry. And so I came up to Indy. Turned out all 3 ended up offering me a job. I didn't want to work for, one was Derek Walker, who had Walker Racing. He actually told me, do not come to Indianapolis. I don't know if you remember this. He told me, if you want to be in sponsorship in motorsports.
No, I don't remember any of this. All I remember is that you told me we were moving here.
Well, no, this was 2 years before. This was before when I was
I don't
No, because 2 years before, I wanted to go into motorsports. Derek Walker said, you got to go to England if you want to be in sponsorship. Zach Brown was just starting an agency called Just Marketing, I think, at that time, or maybe it was Zach Attack. But anyway, I didn't really want to work for him either. And I couldn't justify moving our family just because I wanted to be in motorsports. And so at the time...
I was all about you being in motorsports.
No, but that's when I took the job at Texas Motor Speedway. And I went to work at Texas Motor Speedway, and I remember the job that they offered me was 1/3 of what I was making at the time. Because at MP3.com, we were making like $120 a year.
Yeah, you had that cool office at Texas Ranger Stadium.
But we went from that, and then when I first met the head of sales at Texas, he said, I'd love to have you, but I can't afford you. And he offered me $40,000, and then he said plus commissions, and I said, okay, so if you're
what we made a year.
Well, hold on, and I asked him, you told me.
Gosh, we were poor.
But we worked out that we could do it for 2 years. And what was funny about this was, and this is a lesson I think our kids can learn if we ever learn this. So I took a salary at $40,000 a year, and I said, okay, if I'm at 100% of your sales goal, what will I make? And he says, probably $60,000 a year. So I said, okay, that's not as bad. I said, if I'm at 200% of your goal.
And mind you, this is 20 years ago.
Yeah, but I said, if I'm at 200% of goal, what am I going to make? And he said, probably 80. So I said, okay, I'll take the job. Knowing that I was going to go, I said, your goals are here. My goals are here. I have mouths to feed, and I have a lifestyle. So that first year, I was over 400% of goal. And I didn't even make $60,000. So what they did was they penciled it. They didn't tell you they only got half commissions on certain things. So the next year, once again, I made 400% of goal, and I was at like 80. And I remember Marcus Smith at Speedway Motorsports was the one who said, why don't you start selling for other tracks? And that's when I started doing some work with Vegas and Sonoma and different things. But that led to the recruiter calling me about a job in Indianapolis. And the job here in Indy, we moved to Indy. I took the job. We came here. And have just enjoyed being in the IndyCar series. But if I roll back, instead of taking...
I love you being in the IndyCar series. It's my most favorite out of all of those jobs. All the perks you've had, all the places we've gone, all the things we've done. IndyCar series is by far my favorite.
Just because you love Elio, or what?
No, not just because I love Elio. I don't love sports. I grew up in Texas where you were supposed to love football. My dad... everything to him was football.
Yep.
And I didn't like sports. I don't like sports. I liked basketball, okay. And then when my mom went to work for the Mavericks, I started watching it and I understood it. But IndyCar racing was the first sport that I got on board and said, oh my gosh, I love this.
The first time I took you to the Indy 500, I'll never forget this, because we sat behind the Newman Haas pit and you were mesmerized that Paul Newman was standing right in front of you.
The whole thing was intriguing.
You were watching him the whole time through the binoculars, and you said, I don't know who that guy is with the curly hair, but he keeps talking to him. And I was like, honey, that's Mario Andretti. But you taught me everything. I didn't know anything about it, and it was so fascinating to me, and it still is. And I just love everything about it. And it's the only sport that I can really, get on board with and just and I appreciate that, because this was in the 2000s. But I remember... when I first took that job at Texas Motor Speedway, I went to Bobby Bollinger and I asked for advice. He was the wisest business person that we knew. And I remember I had one job with the .com, and they were offering me $80,000 plus stock options. Texas Motor Speedway was offering me $40,000 plus commission. And we were making $120 at the time is what we were making through mp3.com.
And Bobby's office was right there by yours, right?
But Bobby, we were sitting in the hot tub when he said this. He said, John, he said...
You and Bobby sitting in the hot tub
talking
over jobs.
He said, John, you need to come to terms with whatever job you don't take is the job you would have made $1 million off of. And he said, so then just take the job that you really want. And so I made a decision because you asked a question and said, if you take that .com job, because I was going to run the sales office in the southern region, which was Dallas and Atlanta, whatever. And you said, if you do well at that job and you get promoted, where are we going to go next? And I said, the Bay Area, because they were based in the Bay Area.
I didn't want to do that.
You didn't want to do that. So I took the motorsports job. And all these years later...
And we got pregnant, too, because we only had the boys then, and I didn't want to be in California and have another baby.
Yeah. So anyway, that company was Google, like employee number 80, Whoops. I think, at the time. But hey, I went into motorsports, so thanks. Thanks a lot there, Suzanne, for that. But Bobby was right. Do the job that you love and the other one. But we didn't know. I mean, at that point in time, you didn't know.
It could have been split off
no.
a million ways.
The company, I mean, there was like Northern Lights and all these different search engines. You had no idea that Google was, and we had just gone through the up and the down of the stock options, so it wasn't going to work. But anyway, so we moved to Indiana. It's been a good place. I mean, I've done so many different things in IndyCar, from working at the series to then working at a team and working
more than one
promoter team. Yeah, working for promoter, and even the unpaid. Even when I wasn't working, when Doug and I were at Ignition, he still worked race strategy for one of the teams, and I got to be I was able to be the signboard guy.
They don't even have the signboard guy
because it's very dangerous.
Yeah,
and I used to hold that little signboard. You'd sit next to the racetrack, in between the pits and the racetrack, and you would hold the signboard out that would tell them how many laps they're going, or how far they're behind, or when to pit. And
so the kids and I were watching one Sunday afternoon. You were at a race. Where was it?
I think it was Milwaukee.
Yeah. And Elio, funny enough, was coming around, and you were holding the sign out for, who were you signboard for?
I think it was Matsura at that time, Japanese driver on Panther.
And you stood up and you held the sign, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's Dad. And the boys laughed because as soon as he came around the corner, he hit the wall and you just disappeared. Yeah. I mean, you were just gone.
Well, you have to. They teach you that always looking forward. As soon as you see the car get out of the line, then you better make a dive, because all those parts are coming towards you. And it was there's a reason why they don't have that roll anymore, because it is very dangerous, because you're literally sitting on the track.
Isn't it cool, though, that you can say that, like, you remember when?
Yeah.
You know, that they don't even have that anymore, and yet you were a part of it.
I'm an old guy. But
it was
interesting because, like, Doug Bowles left Panther, I left the IndyCar series, and we both went to work for Ignition, which is a global marketing agency out of Atlanta. Boy, that changed my life. Working with guys who did the Olympic Torch Relay and big global events, and working on these incredible brands like Vodafone and Delta. And Doug and I were working here in Indy.
Do you know what I was doing?
What were you doing?
I was doing the 100 jobs that I'm still doing.
Yeah, exactly. But,
okay.
But
just
Doug and
I would insert that.
But Doug and I had that great office over in Carmel, and the greatest thing out of all of it was Dill Driscoll, who has been a mentor and a friend to me. And I could do a whole episode just on Dill-isms that I've learned over the years and how he's impacted my life. And we were really blessed to work there. And then 2000 sold the agency, and then in 2009 the economy kind of tanked, and that's when had to pivot. Do some different jobs, and that's when I went into the nonprofit space. I remember Doug went to work at the Speedway, and I went into the nonprofit world.
You did football first, though, didn't you?
Yep, did football.
You hated that.
I don't like football, and the NFL as a business.
Said the agents were like snakes. I mean,
the agents are, but
it's just not a happy space to work in.
Well, the problem is there are 850 plus or minus licensed NFL agents, and there's only 1,500 players. So every single time you're not talking to your client, somebody else is. And when you go to the combine and you go, we have horses. I've been to horse sales before. The combine is the exact same thing. It's a bunch of rich people sitting, evaluating flesh, and deciding that they want to have the best looking stable out of anybody. That's what NFL owners do. There's no value placed in the player. It's just that they're a piece of flesh. They evaluate them like they do horses. They see how high they can jump, how far they can run.
And then they pay them all this money, and they're not prepared, these young guys who come from rocky backgrounds.
23 years of age. And I remember Steven Jackson, who was a all-pro running back for the Rams. He told me, he said, man, he goes, I sold my soul. He said, they can tell me what to do. He goes, I'm a slave to the. And I said, yeah, but you're making $15 million a year. He goes, yeah, but I have no decision making in what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I didn't really like the business.
Your life is not your own.
Yeah, I didn't like the business. But if it weren't for Des Bryant being with the Cowboys and I had him his rookie year, I never would have connected with the guys in Dallas. Joe Peterson introduced me to Jack First and those guys with the Boy Scouts. And Jack was on the board of the Boy Scouts. And I was a Boy Scout leader. I love Scouts. It's changed my kids' lives. But when I was asked by two of the board members to kind of help join this 100-year-old nonprofit and to change the direction of the nonprofit and work on the Summit Project, I loved working there at the Boy Scouts. And I loved working with these incredible men and women who I really fell in love with working inside of a nonprofit where at the end of the day you felt like you're making a difference in people's lives, not just making money. And I remember in 2013, we had worked for years to open up the Summit Bechtel Reserve in West Virginia. And it was the week before we were opening the day before we were opening the Jamboree. And Doug called me. And I loved working with Doug when we were in agency. And he said, someday we'll work together again. And he called and said, why haven't you called me? I said, what are you talking about? And I'm living in a tent for like a month getting the Summit ready. And he says, well, they made me president at the Speedway.
That was so cool when
and I was
it
so
came
happy
across
for
the
him.
news.
I was like,
so
Doug,
happy.
I'm so proud of you. He goes, why haven't you called me? I said, well, Doug, because I'm living in a tent trying to open
I'm in the
scout camp.
wilderness.
And he said, you want to come back to work in the racing? And I said, Doug, I can't talk to you right now. And I said, let me get through the Jamboree. Well, the Jamboree changed my life because, once again, you saw how your work benefited thousands and thousands of young people, and I couldn't not being in nonprofit world. So, I kind of gave up on motorsports.
You stayed in nonprofit for a really long time.
Well, yeah, and not only with the Scouts.
And you still have your foot in it.
Well, I have a full-time job in it right now.
Yeah.
But I worked in the Boy Scouts, and then I was also able to work with some other ministries and things of that nature during that time. And I remember being at the Boy Scouts. I ended up having 3 jobs at the Boy Scouts because I was over corporate partnerships and then also ad sales and sponsorship for the events. But then they also made me the chief sustainability officer, and it was fun. Multiple jobs. I realized that I enjoy doing multiple jobs at the same time.
Yeah, much like, me here.
You here doing 100 jobs?
While you're doing your fancy thing,
Well, when I left the Boy Scouts, though, we decided to stay in the nonprofit space, and I was able to work in sustainable forestry, and then went to work for the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was the greatest.
And you got your master's during all this.
Yep. So went to grad school during that period of time, and even though I'm working in racing now and working in marketing now, I can't not be involved in the nonprofit space, and people who know us know that I'm working with a ministry that I just adore and love and feel called to. Called Partners. If you go to wearepartners.org, you'll learn about it. But it's a Christian ministry that's focused on sharing the gospel and discipling new believers and planting new communities of Jesus followers all around the world, really to the ends of the earth. And so that's something I get to do a majority of my time. And I think as we talk about all these jobs, take a step back. What do you want our kids to know about work?
I want our kids to work hard, and I think our kids
do work hard. But I want our kids to enjoy what they do.
Work ethic. I'll never forget what John Andrews said to me. This is recently. He was at work, and he said, Mom, he was so mad. He called me, and he said, I'm just mad because these guys, they go out to their cars and they goof off or they leave or they, and he says, and then I'm doing this. I'm the one. He was really irritated that they didn't have a work ethic, like they were there to get their 6 hours or however many, and they didn't have a work ethic, I guess. And it's just, he has that. And I think that's the one good thing that we've done. I think horses did that.
Yep.
Because you don't give a little bit to a horse, or any animal. You have to give everything because they are completely dependent on you. And that's what he has learned,
But I want our kids to have a job. I mean, it's like, I've been blessed to do jobs that I've absolutely loved and get to work with some people I really love. And I remember one time Chuck Hargett, a friend of ours, asked me, John, out of all the jobs you've done, what's your favorite job? What do you think I said?
Gosh, I don't know. What would you say? Raising your kids?
No, I said my next one. So my next job is always my favorite job, but I want my kids to have a great time. I want them to enjoy life, do what you love, and you'll earn money doing it. I think both of our boys at least have jobs that they absolutely love.
And Jules is striving, but Jules has got a more difficult road ahead of her because hers is going to be that creative role. Yeah, and that's a little bit more difficult because you have to give a part of yourself away, every time that you do something, and that's a fine line. And being a theater person, yes, I was a teacher for all those years, but what did I teach? I taught theater. And so you have to give so much of yourself, not just as a teacher, but as a student of the theater arts. You're giving of yourself constantly. It's always a piece of you that you leave out there. And that's what I want them to realize, that what they do is important. Whatever they choose to do is important.
Well, you always said you wished you were married to an accountant that left at like 9 a.m, came back at 5
You know what? I may have said that when I was 20. But I think I would have been long bored by now.
Yeah. Well, I'm always envious of professionals who have always known what they wanted to do. I think about
like me.
No, like my brother-in-law, like Phil, because he's been a dentist all of his career.
Yeah.
He's provided for his family very well, but they never. He was somewhat landlocked. They never could move, because they're always stuck in Dallas, things of that nature. Once you build a practice, but I have been envious of people. I'm sure that they're envious of me being able to travel around and do different jobs.
I don't know. When we moved to Indy, when we moved to the farm, and you had other opportunities, I'm sure. And I just said, well, good for you. I hope you enjoy them because I'm done.
Yeah. That's why I commuted for years.
Yeah, I was just finished. And I think we kind of made a happy medium there because I'm done.
We did. Well, I as we close, we can talk about jobs and jobs and jobs and
because it's never ending. The jobs are never ending.
But I think I finally have figured out what I do and what I do really well. And what I do well is that I love to work with senior leaders on their biggest problems. It's like in my current engagements, I'm working with CEOs and I'm working on their biggest problems. And I get a lot of energy out of that, and that's something I really enjoy. The fact that it gets to be in motorsports is a lot of fun. The fact that I get to do those things. You enjoy the motorsports. I know you enjoy that side of things, but that's not really what pays our bills. It's the marketing and everything behind it. But
honestly, if you say to me today, what does your husband do? I'm just going to say, just ask him. Because I don't even know.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, I think that's about it as it relates to talking about jobs. One of the best things to do when you're working or headed to work is listen to podcasts.
Oh, forever the spokesperson.
We are available on Apple. This podcast, Marry Your Best Friend podcast. Tell your friends about it. Hopefully we'll get over 40 subscribers on
40 subscribers.
Yeah. Hey, we keep gaining every single week. That's the important thing. And we're on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon Music, pretty much wherever you find podcasts. And if you want to see my beautiful wife, you can always check out the YouTube channel. Just search for John and Suzanne, or
I just
Marry
follow
Your Best
along.
Friend. Yeah, follow along. But
no, I just follow you along.
Well, that's true. But if you want to know more, we have social feeds. You can follow Suzanne on Instagram or Facebook. We don't really do them that much, but it's there.
Not very exciting.
It's not very exciting at all. But
unless you want to see a baby goat or two.
There you go. We do have new baby goats, so you got to look at that. But I will tell you, our next episode is going to be one you don't want to miss because we're going to be talking about.
What are we going to be talking about, babe?
Suzanne's pet peeves.
Oh, my list.
Yeah, you go ahead and start making a list of everything.
Oh, I've been doing it all day.
Suzanne's pet peeves. But anyway, seriously, thank you for listening. We appreciate you guys, all 38 of you. And we had 208 downloads, so golly, it's just huge. Got to start somewhere.
Why not start here?
Yeah. Anyway, I love you.
Love you.
I'm glad we're having these talks. Even if nobody listens, I love having a date night with you.